Hi, I'm Gabriel Dishaw, and I'm an upcycle artist. I've always been pretty artistic, but I guess the journey that started me down the upcycling path started in 9th grade. My first piece was titled Mary on a Donkey. It really started with a competition within my classroom. My teacher at the time wrote a list of different things that I could explore. It was kind of open, and one of those things was junk art. And so that intrigued me, and did some research, and then created a piece using recycled or upcycled parts from my garage. I was really looking at what were the scraps or things that were sitting around that I could repurpose, take apart. That really involved me taking wire apart, finding really unique pipe fitting materials and so forth. I ended up winning first place in a competition. And so that certainly helped to pave the road towards the work that I do now. For me, upcycling really is around this idea of reimagining things as they were maybe in their original purpose or design, and reimagining those or reassembling those into something different. The creative process for me really starts a couple different ways. It could start with me taking apart or disassembling a piece, and I get inspiration from that. There might be subtle objects that cue up ideas, thoughts. It may have the silhouette of a particular animal, or be a focal point that then allows me to explore further and take that further. So a good example of that is the rearing horse sculpture. That really started with me taking apart an adding machine, and from the components there, they really resembled the basis of a head of a horse. And so that's really what started. It started with that exercise, and then grew to a full-length 6-foot rearing horse. Part of what makes this fun and so intriguing to me is around the hunt. One of the ways I find material is by going to like flea markets or antique stores. As I just kind of peruse that stuff, that junk, that throwaway things, it sparks interesting ideas or things that may come into my mind. So the Louis Vuitton series had an interesting genesis or starting point. I stopped at this little resale shop and came upon this big stack of Louis Vuitton luggage, and I was like, wow, maybe there's something here. I could maybe explore something here. Walked out of there with one of the pieces. And within that process of me disassembling it, reimagining it, and actually start to build out a piece, there was definitely some energy around this particular approach. And so then quickly called that consignment shop back up and bought the rest of them. Another approach that I use in my creative process is this play-off of colors or mashups of interesting ideas. You can see a lot of that play out within my Star Wars series, and evolving that and pushing the limits and boundaries on that. So I continue to try to push myself and explore different ideas, different thoughts, different approaches. One of the series that I have a lot of passion around is the sneaker series. So I'm a huge sneakerhead. I've got hundreds of pairs of shoes and love the energy around that. What I love to do with this particular series is reimagine those sneakers kind of in a digital world or kind of pixelated. Usually that process starts out with me drawing out the design of that and how that would look in more of a digital world, and then start to build that using circuit boards. Usually start with a color palette also in that process. My work stretches past just the actual process and the ultimately creating of the piece and finishing it. I really think about what is that experience when someone gets one of my pieces delivered to them. And so part of that process over the last couple of years, I've really started to look at what does that unboxing experience look like. And so all of my pieces now come in a really nice aluminum box with some of my logo on it, and usually some graffiti. Certainly think that is part of the whole package of the experience when purchasing one of my pieces. A driving force within my approach and the materials I use is this idea around e-waste. And one of the missions that I have is to help create some dialogue around that, and that hopefully my work and my creative process helps to influence others around this idea around finding creative ways on addressing e-waste. That this stuff doesn't necessarily need to end up in a landfill. It can be repurposed, reused, reimagined into something different.